They came on a Monday, not with blaring horns or dramatic lights, just silence. The kind of silence that makes your spine crawl and your instincts scream run. The sky above Berlin cracked open like a rotting fruit, and they poured through. Sleek, black ships, like the universe had sent its worst to collect a debt we never owed. I was stationed at Joint Command, deep under the Rockies. Didn't matter if you wore a uniform or carried a badge that day, everyone was the same. Powerless, staring at live feeds from cities collapsing around the world. New York turned into glass within seconds. Tokyo vanished under a storm of violet fire. And London. Christ, London didn't even get a warning. The bastards didn't send messages, no ultimatums, no demands, just action. That's when it hit me. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't looking for resources or peace. They were exterminators. To them, Earth was infested. And we were the roaches. General Halford slammed his fist on the table, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would snap. "They think we'll fold," he said, voice like gravel soaked in fury. "They don't know us." And he was right. Because the thing about humans, about men who've had everything taken, is that we don't beg. We build, we fight. And when it's our turn, we make sure history never forgets who drew first blood. I was a tech analyst. That morning I was coding firewall patches. By sundown, I was assigned to Operation Revenant, Earth's retaliatory strike program. No uniforms, no ranks, just a collection of pissed-off minds, engineers, outlaws, war vets, and anyone who could turn pain into payloads. We didn't have time for protocols or UN resolutions. Hell, the UN was dust by then. So we hit back with everything we had. Rigged satellites to become orbital spears, turned scrapyards into drone factories, even dragged Cold War tech out of museum vaults and slapped nukes on them. The aliens underestimated one thing. They thought their shiny plasma rifles and bio-armor made them gods. What they didn't understand is this. Humans have always fought monsters. We've bled in trenches, on beaches, in deserts, and every time someone tried to break us, we came back meaner. We lost billions in the first week. I watched my sister's face fade into static during a live call from Madrid. They hit her sector hard. I still hear her scream when I close my eyes. But grief had to wait. Revenge didn't. On day 9 we captured one of them, alive. The thing was over 7 feet tall, skin like wet obsidian, eyes hollow as space. It didn't speak English, but it didn't need to. The way it looked at us, like we were nothing but insects, was enough. Halford stood in front of it, arms crossed, staring like he wanted to rip the damn thing in two. "Record this," he told me. So I did. He leaned close to the creature and growled, "Congratulations. You just declared war on Earth, and here's something you better carve into your alien skull. We don't do surrenders." I sent that video to every resistance cell, every surviving country, every human still breathing. That line became our banner, our war cry. And war? It had just begun. We launched the first counterstrike at dawn. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't clean, it sure as hell wasn't fair, but it was human. That's the only kind of war we knew, messy, desperate, and relentless. Our target was a forward base the aliens had dropped outside Cairo. Satellite scans showed the structure went 3 levels underground, shielded by some kind of energy field that turned drones into dust. But they hadn't accounted for one thing. Rats, not actual rats, but people who knew how to crawl through sewers, dig through rubble, and slip past any line without being seen. We didn't send in soldiers. We sent ex-cons, miners, and tunnel rats from Mumbai who'd grown up living 3 floors under the dirt. That's what humanity is. Millions of people born in chaos, hardened by poverty, and fueled by the kind of rage no alien could calculate. They got in. They planted charges. They walked right out with parts of their tech, still pulsing with alien energy. The explosion left a crater so big it looked like the Earth had swallowed their outpost whole. It was the first win. Not a big one. But it gave us something we hadn't tasted since the invasion began. Hope. That terrible, dangerous thing they couldn't kill no matter how many cities they burned. I spent those nights buried in stolen alien code, my fingers raw, eyes bloodshot. We were trying to reverse engineer their comms, figure out how they spoke, how they coordinated. One mistake, and you'd fry half a command center with static pulses. But we learned. Fast. Desperation sharpens genius like fire tempers steel. And then there was him. He didn't have a name in our files. No rank, no record, no affiliation. Just scars, a dead stare, and a voice like gravel after a landslide. They called him the Warden. He used to run a black site in Alaska before the invasion. Interrogation, extraction, the kind of ops even the CIA denied existed. Now, he was our scalpel. When we needed to know how an alien brain ticked, we sent it to him. I only saw one of his subjects after he was done once. Whatever that thing used to be, it wasn't anymore. Just twitching meat, whimpering through broken lungs. It didn't matter if you were alien or human. When the Warden went to work, the truth came screaming out. And he told us the truth. The invaders weren't the top of the food chain. They were just enforcers. Mercenaries sent to pacify Earth before the real armada arrived. This was their warm-up. They had no idea what they were walking into. We leaked this intel everywhere, not because we wanted sympathy. We wanted rage. We wanted the people hiding in basements, buried under rubble, picking glass out of their kids' hair, to hear the truth and burn for it. It worked. Rebellions started flaring up in every corner. In the ruins of Paris, a gang of orphans hijacked an alien skimmer and kamikazed it straight into a patrol tower. In Moscow, the old warlords returned, pulling tanks out of frozen garages and carving trenches through occupied zones. And in Argentina, entire towns vanished underground, only to re-emerge weeks later armed, organized, and lethal. We weren't fighting for Earth anymore. We were fighting for vengeance, and every drop of human blood they spilled was just more fuel for the fire we were about to unleash. By week 3, the rules had changed. The aliens had stopped seeing us as vermin and started treating us like a virus, contagious, adaptable, impossible to wipe out. And like any smart invader facing a losing war, they escalated. They called it a sterilization beam. Real original name for a weapon that erased everything it touched. Not just people, memory, history, trees, homes, rivers, animals. A whole valley in Nepal turned into a smooth white pit, like someone had erased it from God's canvas. No fire, no debris. Just silence and a pulse of radiation that made Geiger counters wail for hours after. That was their message. You're not fighting for survival anymore. You're fighting against extinction. And that's when Earth snapped. It started with Australia. They'd been quiet. Too quiet. Everyone assumed their networks were down. But truth was, they'd gone dark on purpose. The outback became a death trap. Booby-trapped terrain, decoy cities, mirrored heat signatures to scramble alien sensors. They didn't try to defend their cities. They made them bait. The aliens fell for it, again and again. My role shifted. I wasn't just decoding signals now, I was rewriting them, feeding false data into alien comms, sending coordinates that looked like human strongholds, but were actually rigged with anti-gravity mines and liquid thermite. The kind of traps that didn't just kill, they humiliated. But the aliens weren't the only problem anymore. Humanity began turning on itself in the cracks. There were people who wanted to surrender, believed collaboration would save them. A group in Geneva offered their tech in exchange for protection. The aliens incinerated them anyway, but the damage was done. Trust was shattered. We started shooting collaborators on sight. No warnings, no trials. If you stood with them, you weren't human anymore. I remember the first time I gave the order to execute a group of scientists who'd handed over genetic data to the enemy. They begged, claimed they were trying to save what was left of our species. Maybe they believed that. Maybe they were just scared. Didn't matter. They'd made their choice. The gunman didn't hesitate. "Traitors bleed just the same," he muttered, wiping the barrel. By then, the underground labs had managed to crack part of the alien neural code. We couldn't replicate their weapons, but we could turn them against each other. We found ways to spoof identity signals, trigger friendly fire. I watched a whole alien gunship fleet open fire on its own ground forces, confused and scrambling, while humans in stolen armor slipped through and set the charges. We were fighting dirty now, guerrilla, asymmetrical, and it was working. But the warden, he had other plans. He came to me one night, eyes sunken, voice lower than a whisper. "We're going to send them a message," he said. "Not a warning, a reminder." He handed me a data drive and a single name, Harkoon Base. It was their largest outpost in orbit, a floating fortress. We'd never even scratched it. Until now, the plan was suicidal. Send a team aboard, breach the core, overload their reactor, and crash the whole thing into the Pacific like a divine fist. No one was expected to survive, but volunteers lined up by the hundreds. Because by then, Earth didn't want survivors. It wanted martyrs. They launched at midnight. 6 repurposed orbital shuttles, rusted shells patched with alien tech and prayers, each packed with a strike team of volunteers who knew they weren't coming back. Men who had buried their families, seen their cities leveled, and had nothing left but vengeance. They weren't the best soldiers. Some weren't soldiers at all. But they had the one thing the enemy couldn't process. Rage. Not strategic. Not calculated. Raw, blind rage, the kind that turns pain into purpose. The warden led the op. Of course he did. If death was guaranteed, he wanted to be the one walking it into their front door. From command, I monitored the whole mission through scrambled feeds and heartbeat trackers. The signals were shaky. Harkoon Base had enough jamming fields to block a solar flare, but the teams pushed through. No stealth, no fancy tactics, just brute force. They punched into the lower docking bay, breaching through with scavenged plasma drills. The moment the hull tore open, it was chaos, screams, static, gunfire. The alien response was immediate. Automated defense drones swarmed the breach point, cutting down half the team before their boots hit the floor. But they didn't stop. Every second brought us data, layout scans, enemy positions, power flow maps. I was patching together a blueprint in real time as our men were dying to send it. And then I saw it. A vulnerability in the coolant system, right near the core. If they could breach it, cause a chain reaction, the whole station would go critical in under 4 minutes. I relayed it to the warden. No reply. His vitals were still pinging, but his comms were dead. A minute passed, then another. Just as I was about to call it, his voice crackled through, broken, low, but alive. "Mark the site, I'll handle the rest." And then the feed cut again. We watched the station from ground-based telescopes, just a tiny speck orbiting Earth, barely distinguishable from a star. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing changed. Then it happened. A light flared, brighter than any sunrise. The core went up first, a blinding flash that tore through the station's spine. Then the chain reaction, collapsing levels like a domino line from hell. Pieces of the fortress rained down through the atmosphere, lighting the sky like a meteor storm. And then the body, Harkoon Base, or what was left of it, came down, screaming through the stratosphere, glowing red-hot, before it slammed into the Pacific with a force that registered worldwide. A rogue wave flattened half of Hawaii. The debris cloud took out satellites, but no one cared. Because we won, we took one of theirs. We showed them Earth doesn't kneel. Not to gods, not to monsters. The next day, for the first time since the invasion started, their fleets paused. They didn't attack, didn't advance. They hesitated. And that hesitation, that tiny crack in their certainty, was all we needed. The warden never came back. His vitals faded minutes before the explosion. But he didn't die in vain. He became a symbol. We carved his face into the walls of our bunkers, spray-painted his last words across every ruined building we could find. Let them come. Earth has enough graves for all of them. We knew they'd retaliate, we just didn't know how hard. 3 days after Harkon Base fell, the sky over Africa turned red. Not like a sunset, like it was bleeding. Their mothership arrived, not a vessel, not even a warship. It was a moving continent of death, blotting out the sun and sending electrical storms across 5 countries just from its presence. They called it the Cleansing Star. It hovered above the ruins of Lagos, then unleashed a pulse that flattened every living thing within a 100-mile radius. Trees vaporized, rivers boiled. Humans didn't even get a chance to scream. Just silence. Again. We lost contact with 7 resistance cells, 30,000 fighters gone, just like that. Panic set in. Even the strongest among us, those who'd watched their families die and kept fighting, started to crack. Some said the warden's sacrifice had only delayed the inevitable, that the retaliation meant Earth was lost, but I wasn't ready to believe that. Not when I'd seen what we were capable of. Not when I'd witnessed the rage still burning in the hearts of the broken. That night, I was called into a classified op. Highest clearance. No names, just a location. Novosibirsk, Russia. Frozen hell. What was left of it? When I arrived, I understood. They had captured another alien. But this one wasn't like the foot soldiers or tech engineers. This one was command. We didn't know its name, but the markings on its armor matched the same insignia seen during the first wave, the ones who coordinated entire regional purges. The warden would have had it squealing in 10 minutes. But he was gone. So now it was me. I wasn't trained for interrogation. My background was data, code, systems. But when I looked into that creature's eyes, something cracked. I saw no fear, no remorse, just contempt. That was enough. I didn't ask questions. I told stories. I told it about the children crushed in the rubble of Berlin, about the woman who'd walked into a gun nest with a bomb strapped to her chest after watching her husband get dissected, about the starving kid in Detroit who shot down a scout drone with a rock and died laughing. I told it Earth's story. And something changed. The alien shifted, leaned forward. It made a sound, low, guttural, like a growl but laced with something uncertain. I kept going. I showed it videos, footage of the warden's last stand, of resistance fighters turning alien weapons against their own kind, of our species turning grief into violence, fear into fury. And then it spoke. Not in words, in emotion. Through the translator mesh, I felt it, something they didn't understand. They weren't afraid of our weapons, they were afraid of our will. No other species had ever resisted this long. None had ever retaliated with such madness, such stubborn defiance. They thought we'd collapse under the weight of their superiority. Instead, we were adapting, evolving. And it scared them. That was our leverage. I didn't report it to command. Not yet. I had something better. I had the psychological profile of an enemy that believed in domination, but had never tasted a true human war. Now they would. The word surrender was officially outlawed in every resistance broadcast after that. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were rewriting the doctrine of war, Earth-style. Command approved a new operation based on the data I pulled from the captured alien's mind. We called it Operation Thorn. The idea was simple. Don't just fight them. Embed fear into their systems. Infect their ranks with paranoia. Make every soldier wonder if the next city they walk into will be their last. We started small. First, we hijacked one of their communication nodes in eastern Brazil. Took 2 teams and a week of crawling through jungle infested with biomines. But we got in. Instead of disabling it, we repurposed it. We began sending messages in their own language, taunts, false orders, fake alerts. Then came the impersonations. Using salvaged armor and neural mimics, we posed as defectors from their own forces. We'd walk into their camps, rig them with explosives, then vanish before the detonation. Alien commanders stopped trusting their own troops. Their patrols thinned out. Their chain of command faltered. Next, we turned to psychological warfare. Every town they occupied started broadcasting screams at full volume during the night. Recordings of our dead. Children, mothers, the wounded crying out in pain. They tried to shut it down, but we'd already wired the speakers into their own power grid. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't stop hearing us. By week 6, they were unraveling. Surveillance showed alien squads hesitating before moving into new zones. More friendly fire incidents, more retreats. Some units abandoned their posts entirely, but not everyone celebrated. There were whispers that we were becoming monsters, that our tactics had crossed the line, that the Warden's methods were being twisted into something even darker. One of my old teammates, Darren, confronted me after a mission, said we were losing our humanity. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Humanity's what got us killed in the first place. This is survival." He didn't argue, but I saw it in his eyes. He was afraid of me now. Didn't matter. We were too deep. There was no going back. Then came the transmission. It came through one of our hacked satellites, wrapped in a data language we'd barely decoded. The voice was mechanical, inhuman, cold. But the message was clear. Cease resistance. Submit. Be preserved. Preserved, like we were insects in a jar. It was a mass communication, meant for all surviving human frequencies. But we didn't panic. We didn't retreat. We responded. Halford stood before a bunker camera, battle-worn, blooded, holding the Warden's old sidearm. He stared into the lens, jaw like stone. Then he said it. "Congratulations. You just declared war on Earth." He raised the gun. "And we don't do surrenders." He pulled the trigger. The broadcast cut with the sound of a single shot. It wasn't suicide. It was the signal. All across the globe, hidden bunkers, rebel cells, scavenger squads, everyone moved. Because the final phase had begun. Operation Thorn was over. Now it was time for Operation Ashfall. Ashfall wasn't just a plan, it was a reckoning. We stopped playing defense. We stopped hiding in the ruins, begging for scraps, holding lines that always crumbled. Ashfall was about flipping the table, burning the board, making them wish they'd never heard the name Earth. The first target was their atmospheric processor in Alaska. The aliens used it to terraform regions into zones unlivable for humans, choking the air with toxins, altering weather patterns. It was guarded by over 1,000 sentries and shielded by 3 overlapping dome fields. We didn't hit it with bombs, we hit it with men. A battalion of former oil riggers, miners, and mercs. People used to harsh terrain, high pressure, and no room for error. They tunneled from 3 miles out under the permafrost, moving through ice and stone with cold precision. It took 15 days. They ate snow, slept in silence, buried their dead where they fell. And then, on day 16, they emerged under the processor and lit the whole core with improvised nuclear charges. When it blew, the shockwave shattered alien towers all the way to Anchorage. 1 down, 17 more sites to go. By then, I'd become more than just a tech. I was part of the Strategic War Council, me, Halford II, and 2 survivors from the Warden's original team. We didn't debate ethics anymore. We debated damage potential. Everything we planned was designed to inflict maximum psychological and strategic chaos. But not everything went right. In Shanghai, our embedded cell was captured mid-op. The aliens didn't just kill them, they broadcasted the execution to every human frequency they could, made a spectacle of it. Gory, slow, methodical. I watched it, every second, couldn't look away. We had to respond. So we did. We found one of their high priests, or whatever they called their leadership caste, snatched him right out of a temple bunker in the Swiss Alps, took 5 drones, 2 ex-spies, and a neural override system we'd barely tested. But we got him. And we did the same thing. Live broadcast, no edits, no mercy. He begged in whatever sound passed for begging in his language. We didn't stop. From that point on, the war changed again. Their superiority complex shattered. They stopped underestimating us, started fearing us. But that fear came with escalation. They unleashed something we hadn't seen before. They called it the Binder. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a weapon, it was a being. 10 stories tall. No face, just a mass of muscle and machine, pulsing with bioelectric venom. It moved through Poland like a storm, absorbing bullets, shrugging off missiles. Entire cities went silent when it passed through. Conventional tactics didn't work. Even our sabotage networks couldn't stop it. We needed something worse, something human. So we made a deal with monsters. Deep under Nevada there was a lab. Off books, forgotten by governments long dead. Inside it, unfinished tech, part biological, part AI, left behind by the Defense Genome Initiative. Stuff they shelved because it scared them. We unshelved it. We didn't even know if it would work. But when the Binder approached the outskirts of Prague, we activated it. We called it Project Shepherd. And it was the first time in this war that the aliens ran. Not retreated. Ran. I watched the Binder scream as something tore through it from within, its tendrils flailing, body convulsing before it collapsed in a heap of bone and alien alloy. It wasn't over. But we'd made our point. This wasn't just resistance anymore. This was retribution. They say the end of a war is when the last shot is fired. But this war wasn't ending with silence. It was ending with a roar. After the fall of the Binder, their command structure fractured. We intercepted transmissions, panicked, disjointed, desperate. Entire fleets went dark. Some even fled. The invincible armada that once marched across our skies was now limping. That's when we made our final move. The location was classified even among us, only codenamed God's Mouth. Buried deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, it was where the alien empire's real control relay hid. Not just a base, a control nexus for the entire network of their war machines, terraformers, surveillance webs. Destroy it, and they'd lose their entire foothold on Earth. It was suicide, so we didn't send soldiers. We sent the broken, men with nothing left, exiled commanders, failed operatives, dying warlords, those with diseases that couldn't be cured. They weren't heroes. They were ghosts, walking into hell with nothing to lose. Among them was Darren, the same man who once told me we were losing our humanity. He volunteered the moment the mission was confirmed. Didn't even ask what it involved. I tried to stop him, told him we needed leaders, not martyrs. He just smiled. "I'm not dying for Earth," he said. "I'm dying so they remember we never bowed." The insertion was brutal. No stealth, just brute force through a frozen canyon under orbital fire. The last signal we got was from Darren himself, his voice low, ragged but clear. "We're inside. No going back now." And then, silence. 20 minutes later, every alien system across the globe froze. Their skyships fell from orbit, smashing into mountains, oceans, deserts. Their drones turned off mid-air, crashing like metal rain. Terraformers stopped humming. Atmospheric pulses ceased. The world held its breath. And then came the message. A simple phrase, broadcast in every language. Earth remains. We all knew what it meant. They were gone, not defeated in battle, not negotiated into peace. Broken by the one thing they never understood. United States. Not our weapons, not our numbers, but our will. You can kill a man, burn his house, crush his bones. But you cannot conquer a soul that refuses to surrender. We spent the next year rebuilding. The scars will never fade. Cities gone, names forgotten, generations lost. But in every rebuilt street, every newborn cry, every sunrise over shattered skylines, we remember. The cost was blood, fire, grief. But Earth stands, and if they ever return, we'll remind them again. This is our world, and we, Doctor, not Neil,